Hello everyone, I'm Rajat Ubhaykar, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that we probably never thought about, but without which the lives we lead, the comfortable lives we lead, would not have been possible. Right from the food on our tables to the clothes we wear, to the latest Amazon delivery parcel that you just got delivered. Everything is dependent on one community of men who transport goods across the length and breadth of the country, economically linking it as one unit. Today, we are going to be talking about truck drivers. Now, you may ask, how did I get interested in the lives of truck drivers? There was nothing that remotely connected me to them. No one I knew was a truck driver or involved in the transportation industry in my life that really ignited my curiosity about truck drivers. I was a student at IIT Kanpur back then, and we had once set out on an impulsive and utterly foolhardy trip. As it usually happens, we had a series of misadventures and found ourselves stranded on a highway near Shimla. It was 10 o'clock in the night. Public transportation had shut for the day. There was no vehicle to take us back to our hotel. We waited for many cars, hoping that one of them would stop. None did. We had almost given up hope until one truck driver came to our rescue. He took us in without a word, and as we neared the end of our journey, I handed him rupees 50 as his well compensated dues. To my surprise, he refused. I was taken aback. It was the first time in my life anyone had ever refused money. I was intrigued. I wanted to know more about the lives of these drivers, about the long days and nights they spend on the road. I remember going back to Kanpur and trawling the internet, trying to find one article or a book that would throw some light on their lives. I came up empty handed. That was perhaps when the idea of the seed of an idea, first took root in my mind. I decided that at some point I want to set out on a journey to write and know more about what truck drivers go through during the course of their daily lives. I traveled 10,000 kilometers across India, covering over 20 states by truck. I documented their lived reality and what exactly happens on the Indian highways, which are often out of the media limelight. My journey started in Bhiwandi, and that was where I first encountered the Mathadis. The Mathadis are a community of head loaders who have monopoly over the loading and unloading of mal into trucks. It is a very coveted job because of the monopoly they enjoy, and Mathadi medallions sell in the open market for lakhs of rupees. I had never known that people like the Mathadis existed. I had never given them any thought. But this was the first time I had come across this unique community of people who enjoy state protection for the loading and unloading of mal. The very first driver I travelled with, Sham, from Bhiwandi to Udaipur, was from Kangra, Himachal. And as I got to know more about him, I realized he had the most excellent taste in music, from Punjabi ghazals to oldies by Lata Mangeshkar and Kishore Kumar. He had a whole range of melodies playing on the truck all the time. I was really impressed by the quality and the eclectic collection that he had curated. So I asked him, and then he told me the story of how he became a truck driver. As a kid in Kangra, his cousins would often take him along on joy rides in trucks, listening to music, which is when he decided that this is what he wants to do in life, travel across the country, listening to his favorite music. Now, I had never imagined that a truck driver could have motivations as urbane as music to take up this profession. One tends to think of them as desperate characters who do things out of desperation and not choice. And as I traveled further, I only realized that our country and the people that inhabit it are more fascinating than we can ever imagine. However, I also discovered some dark things. As I went north, I encountered the shocking extent of opium addiction in Punjab. Most truck drivers in Punjab, I realized, are addicted to a substance called bukki, which is dried poppy husk. And so I, like me, had probably never imagined that people could be living lives like these. It came as a real revelation to me. And as I traveled further, this sense of excitement and revelation only intensified. In the Northeast, I saw how the insurgency affects the routine transportation of goods in the states of Nagaland and Manipur. I found unofficial taxes being collected on the highway, truckers being subject to a lot of difficulty on account of this. I found that trucks that carry food and fuel travel in convoys of over 200 people, 200 trucks escorted by paramilitary vehicles. Such was the extent, this was the nature of transport in many regions of the country. Another sad aspect of this whole journey was the wide prevalence of child labor, of the army of chotus that inhabit almost every dhaba on Indian highways. This is probably nothing new to many of us, given how normalized it has become. But what I discovered was this sort of disregard for rule of law also extended to the truckers themselves sometimes. I found several truckers who took kacha rastas, which is the unpaved roads leading off the main highways, in order to evade tax. There was an entire network of people. Many truckers were also cultivated informants in the regional transport organizations or RTOs, who gave them information about the movement of officials in order to evade any checking. Such is the nature of transport in India, as I discovered. But I also discovered every year 15,000 truck drivers die in accidents. 15,000. Can you imagine a more lethal profession? I certainly can't. I wanted to understand what leads to so many accidents in India, especially among truck drivers, and why is this state of circumstances allowed to continue? Why is it happening? That is what I wanted to understand. Now you may assume that aren't truck drivers drunk at the wheel most of the times? Isn't that the reason why there are so many accidents? Shouldn't we blame them for their own deaths in some way? Well, in most of my interactions with truck drivers, I realized the majority of them realized the risks that drunk driving posed. Many of them told me, "Bhai, हमें भी अपने जान की परवाह है. We also care about our lives." And that stayed with me. I did not encounter many truck drivers getting drunk on the wheel. If they did so, it was at the end of the day when they were about to sleep, just like many working professionals. So I would like to dispel this myth of truck drivers being drunk drivers, which stereotypes them and really affects how they are perceived in society. What I also realized that the world from a cabin looks very different from what we imagine it to be. One would imagine that being so high off the ground, one would have an expansive view of the road ahead. But the truth is that there are many blind spots in the design of the truck. It's very difficult to see what's right below, to your left, or what's behind you. Which is why truck drivers often travel with khalasis or helpers who help them navigate the truck in tricky areas. This is one major cause of accidents as I noticed it. And belying the usual notion that truck drivers are rash, when you sit in the cabin of a truck, it is the smaller vehicles, the cars and the motorcycles, which seem like on a suicide mission, trying to overtake you impatiently without warning. And it seems like they almost have a death wish when you're in the cabin of a truck. And I would really like to put that out there, that image, because most of the trucks that are loaded cannot go beyond certain speeds. It is often the smaller vehicles that seek to overtake them, and that often, in my experience, all led to near collisions. Another big reason for accidents is their working conditions. What I saw was that truck drivers function on barely 2 to 3 hours of sleep. They have their pressure to deliver their maal on time, and many of them also took it as a badge of honor, the ability to go driving on without adequate rest. Sleep deprivation, I would say, is a much bigger cause of concern and a cause of accidents rather than drunk driving. This is also made possible by the relatively unregulated nature of the informal sector in India. There are no adequate labor laws that restrict the number of working hours of truck drivers. Mostly people drive for over 12 hours or 15 hours, 16 hours in a day on day. And that, I feel, is a major cause of accidents. When I was traveling, I saw that one truck driver in our retinue had almost crashed his vehicle into a valley in Kashmir. When we inquired, we found out the chap had dozed off at the wheel. He was nearing the edge only by centimeters. That was the extent of the damage that could have been possible had he moved even a couple of centimeters. But all these working conditions, in a way, are also made possible by the structure of the industry itself. And I would like to talk a bit about that here. Now, 3/4 of the industry in India, the truck industry or the transport industry in India, is run by owners who own less than 5 trucks. This means that the industry is highly fragmented. Owners often end up as drivers themselves, though mostly truck drivers are employed by other owners for a measly salary. One would imagine that being in the transportation industry means that a consignor just calls up a driver for delivery and he hops on. But that is far from the truth. The reality is that there are up to 2 intermediaries between the person who wants to deliver the maal and between the driver. Now, these intermediaries take up to 25 to 30% of the total amount, reducing the truck driver's share in the proceeds. In spite of being the one who's putting his life at risk on Indian highways and taking much of the trouble, drivers don't make more than 20,000 rupees usually a month, often less. Their salaries usually are very low, in the range of 5,000 or so, and they make up the rest by through inams, which is a system of rewards given to truck drivers for delivering their maal on time. They also manage to save some money from whatever is handed over for expenses. This is how they manage to make 15 to 20,000 rupees usually, though it could be more or less. Most of it goes back to their families, who depend on him for their livelihood. But the structure of the industry is such that it also leads to one grave evil, one very unnoticed evil, and that is overloading. Now, overloading, you might imagine it to be quite an innocuous affair. Loading more than what's allowed, what's the big deal? But the truth is that overloading reduces braking efficiency of trucks by 30% or more, which means that trucks cannot brake in time, which leads to many thousands of accidents a year. It is estimated that thousands of people are killed every year, by overloaded trucks, both pedestrians and drivers. And this is in spite of a Supreme Court ruling that prohibited overloading, which goes back to 2005. Now, one would imagine that this ruling would be immediately implemented, but the sad reality is that on the ground, overloading remains more of the norm than the exception. And this is a big issue which is confronting the industry and also the entire road safety ecosystem in India. However, in spite of all these troubles, in my experience, I found truck drivers to be remarkably cheerful and optimistic, most of them about their lives, which I found confounding at many times. Some truck drivers were hopeful of becoming bus drivers, and they used the truck driving as a practice session for their bus driving test. Other truck drivers had ambitions to educate their children in English medium schools so that they could become Sarkari officers. Some had dispatched their children to Dubai or other far-flung places where they could earn a decent wage, though after brutal labor. Others, I found, were more optimistic. One dreamt of going to America someday to buy the latest iPhone. A young chap from Assam called Rahul Boro. Such were the characters that I encountered, and most of them I found were content with their lives to a large extent. However, there was one thing that all of them were united in. This was their frustration and how disheartened they were by the lack of respect they enjoyed in society. One driver told me, "Why are we bad people? हम क्यों बुरे लोग हैं? We'd get your maal across long distances after tolerating the blows of gundas, harassment on the road, or extortion. We do this to get your maal. Why are we bad people? If the next time someone tells you that we are bad people, just ask them to come and stay with us for a week. Then I will ask him, why are we bad people?" This was not always the case. In the 1980s and before that, truck drivers were relatively respected in society. Much like forklift or crane operators today, who are doing a relatively skilled job. Doctor के बराबर मानते थे, one truck driver told me. When they would go to villages, villagers would treat them to tea and even invite them into their homes. They were the harbingers of goods and news. But times have changed now. The introduction of power steering especially really tilted the scales against their favor. Overnight, their job became an unskilled one from a skilled one, as power steering made it much easier to maneuver vehicles without physical strength. This ensured wage stagnation, and wages simply could not keep up with inflation, which led to income stagnation. It was after 1990s or so that the attractiveness of truck driving really declined in India. Today, 85% truckers say they won't recommend truck driving as a profession to their family or friends. I really enjoy hitchhiking, bring the role that they play in our society in the limelight. Firstly, their living conditions and working conditions can be improved. Dormitories and toilet facilities for drivers on the highways are essential for them to be well rested. A driver with a few more hours of sleep means less accidents. Secondly, I think technology can play a big role in improving their lives. Firstly, by reducing the role of the intermediaries, which will ensure that more of the proceeds goes to the driver. There are many startups who are working in this field, and I hope that they will ensure that drivers are empowered to choose who their consignors will be and get more visibility in a market which is marked completely by information asymmetry to the advantage of the intermediaries. Finally, I think we should ensure that there is rule of law on Indian highways, which is most necessary for ease of doing business and in reducing the cost of logistics that is finally included in the final product that we consume. What this means is ensuring that drivers are not subjected to arbitrary extortion on Indian highways, which is often a major source of concern for them. This will not only increase the attractiveness of the profession, but will also ensure that drivers enjoy human dignity, a dignity that is essential to live a life as a full human being. I hope by the end of this talk, you will reconsider when the next time you find yourself cursing a truck driver for being too slow on the highway and for not giving way to our car. I hope that this will make you appreciate more the role played by truck drivers who do a thankless job day and night, come rain or shine. As the dialogue from the movie Irishman goes, if you got it, a truck brought it. If you got it, a truck brought it. Thank you.